שלום לכולם, ערב טוב, אנחנו מחכים לעוד כמה אנשים ועוד מעט נתחיל. היי ערן, מה נשמע? היי גיא, היי אלכס, היי שמר, היי גלית, שומעים אותי?
כן.
אוקיי.
שומעים.
מעולה, אפשר בינתיים לפתוח את המיקרופון, עוד לא התחלנו, אז מי שרוצה יכול בכיף לדבר, להגיד שלום, הכל טוב.
פותחים את הבקבוקים.
מה זה?
פותחים את הבקבוקים.
אוקיי.
מזמין.
יאללה, אני גם.
רואים רק את היד שלך בלי הבקבוק.
כן, כי הבקבוק ירוק.
בדיוק.
עכשיו רואים את הבקבוק.
הנה, עכשיו רואים. אוקיי. טוב, בוא נבדוק את הלבן בינתיים, נראה מה הולך. לא התחלנו היום. היום בכל מקרה לא אני מנחה את הטעימה, אנחנו נחכה לבחור בשם פלורן, הוא המבקבק עצמו, והוא יעביר לנו את הטעימה, בחור צרפתי.
הנה, לחשב שלי אמרת, ריטל.
קל, מקליטים גם את זה, נכון?
בטח, אנחנו כבר מקליטים.
גל, כמה יש בכל בקבוק?
אמרו לי 30.
סגור.
אין לי פה על הכוס מידה, אבל נראה לי, כן. כשהיום יש לנו טעימה קצת גדולה, יש הרבה אנשים, משהו כמו 50, אני חושב.
וואו.
וואו.
אוקיי.
מה העניינים?
היי רן, מה נשמע?
העם שואל, זאת אומרת יעל, באיזה כוסות לעשות את הטעימה? האם לעשות אותם בכוסות כאלה?
פה, מה האופציה השנייה?
כן, קרן.
כאלה נגיד?
אני מעדיף את הכוסות עם רגל ארוכה, יותר נוח להחזיק ופחות מתחמם ביד גם.
אוקיי.
אבל יותר נשברות, זה תלוי, אם אתם לא קלאמזי אז אין בעיה.
יש מדיח.
אבל לפעמים עד שזה מגיע למדיח זה נשבר.
רגע, אצלך ילדים לא שוטפים כלים?
יש מדיח.
מי מכניס למדיח?
הילדים יום כן יום לא, כאילו יום אחד יום שני. ובסוף שבוע אני זכיתי. הבעיה היא לא בלהכניס למדיח, הבעיה שזה עומד בכיור וזה נשבר בכיור.
כן, פה שזה...
נופל לך איזה צלחת.
לא, בגלל זה האמת היא שאני שוטף אותם ביד. לא נותן להם להיות יותר מדי בכיור.
שיש הרבה זה מתחיל להיות מעיק.
אני אוהב להציג.
רגע, אני אביא לקראת.
אוקיי. רגע, בוא נראה, יש עוד אנשים שרוצים להיכנס ואני לא מכניס אותם. יש. יש. אוקיי. מעולה. אגב, רן, אם שאלת, לגלנקירן עצמם יש כוסות כאלה, ויש אותם בארץ, אתה יכול, הן הרבה יותר נוחות, והן גם...
באמת אני בונה על ריטל.
הרבה יותר יקרות, חבל על הכסף.
כסף זה, אתה יודע...
לא, הן לא יותר טובות, אז זה מה שאני אומר.
למה? אבל ככה אני יכול לשתות עם הזרת למעלה ולהגיד, אבל אני שותה בריטל.
ריטל זה, אתה יודע, זה טוב, זה מרשים את העיקרים שהם קצת עלו בלמעלה בקסטה, אבל לא את כולם.
טוב, אני מוכן.
מעולה. רגע, מי עוד מחכה לנו פה להצטרף?
אוי, רציתי לסקר.
ביל, אוקיי.
אהלן.
להב. בוא נראה למי לא אמרתי שלום. רני, מה נשמע? אתה במיוט.
אני לא במיוט. אני בטלפון, אז זמני קצוב, מה שנקרא, שעה גת.
תמיד אתה בדרך, תמיד אתה בדרכים אתה.
לא, אני לא בדרכים, אני במרפסת כפר, אני בבידוד.
בבידוד לא יצא מהבית, מסכן.
זה נהיה ברכב.
כן, כן.
תאותת בפנייה.
כן.
מי שגר בפתח תקווה הוא בבידוד כל הזמן.
זה העונש שלו.
ניקו היום אצלך, מה שהוא עושה את זה עצמאית?
אני לא יודע, לדעתי לא יודע.
אבל לא אצלך, אתה בבידוד בעצם.
אצלי הוא לא, בוא נגיד זה ככה.
אוקיי. אני רואה שיגאל מחובר. יגאל שומע אותי? יגאל? אני רואה את המטבח של יגאל, אבל את יגאל אני לא רואה.
זה מחובר לו במטבח נראה לי.
כן, כן, במטבח. אוקיי, בואו נראה כמה אנשים יש לנו 19, יש עוד הרבה אנשים שצריכים להתחבר.
כן, אבל הנה אני רואה יורי ולהב באותו מקום.
אצלי כמה נשמע.
רני, אנחנו חיים, אחי, אנחנו בסדר.
אתה נשמע טוב.
אני לא מבין איך אתם חיים, אבל וואלה.
וואלה, את האמת, אמרנו יום רום, לא צריך לשתות יותר מדי, אז התחלנו בבירה ככה ניפה על ההתחלה באיזה 12 בבוקר. היינו קצת בירושלמי, ואחרי זה המשכנו לדוניה. חזרתי עם יין הביתה, ועכשיו אני פה איתכם.
יאללה, כל אבות המזון היום.
באמת, רני, תכלס, 4 טעימות היה היום בירושלמי, קטנות. טעימה האחרונה הייתה מאוד מעניינת. חזרתי עם משהו חמוד, טעימה שמחכה לכם.
יאללה, מגניב.
נס רפואי, נס רפואי.
חגגתי אתמול 33, אני חייב, אין מה לעשות.
שאלה היא תחגוג 34.
זה תלוי בבת זוג שלי, לא בי.
בוא נאמר, אנחנו כבר היינו שם, אז הכל טוב.
כן, אין לך, אתה לא מפספס הרבה, תקשיב, אתה יכול ללכת עכשיו, זה בסדר.
זה לא נהיה יותר טוב מעכשיו.
מאז 33 שלי, בוא נגיד זה ככה.
בסדר, נו, יש עוד וויסקי לנסות, יש עוד דברים לטעום. בוא נראה, כשהאלכוהול יהפוך להיות חרא, אז נגיד די.
חברים, היום בטעימה קצת סדר. כל השאלות תעלו לצ'אט, גל ירכז לכם אותם, ובכל איזה אופנינג שם שפלורנט ייתן לנו מקום לשאלות, אז גל בעצם יעביר את השאלות אליו. אז להעביר לו שאלות, כל מיני דברים שמסקרנים, אין שאלה קטנה מדי או גדולה מדי, הכל פה סבבה, כולנו באנו פה ללמוד, אז תרגישו חופשיים.
בדיוק, יש פה את הקטע הקטן שעכשיו אני כותב שם כל מיני שטויות. כתבתי לירן.
יש לי שאלה לגבי הרום עם השומן.
לא, הוא לא פה, הלוואי היה פה.
נראה לי הזוי.
תשאל שאלה, אם נדע לענות, נענה, אם לא, אנחנו נחכה לפלורן.
כן, כן.
אוקיי. יש עוד 3 דקות? וואלה, הקדמנו היום, יפה. אוקיי. יש פה מישהו מהאנשים שאתה איזשהו רום של קומפני דזאונט לפני? אף אחד?
לא.
מגניב.
יורי מצביע, אני רואה את יורי מצביע.
יש לי את הבליז בבית.
אוקיי. אסף, מה נשמע? אוקיי, מי עוד פה? מצטרף. אוהד. גדלוב. אוקיי. כל מי שנמצא פה בטעימה ולא קיבל מאיתנו כוס, אוקיי? אז א', אנחנו יודעים שחלק לא קיבלו, זה בגלל שהכוסות הגיעו יחסית מאוחר, במיוחד לאנשים שביקשו משלוח והיה צריך להפיץ להם את המשלוח כמה שיותר מוקדם, כי זה לוקח כמה ימים. יכול להיות שגם אנשים שאספו לא קיבלו, אז פשוט אני מבקש, כל מי שלא קיבל כוס, לשלוח הודעה, הכי טוב באימייל, ואנחנו נטפל בזה במהלך שבוע הבא. בסדר? אני אשים את האימייל שלנו פה בצ'אט, ופשוט לשלוח שורה קצרה לשם, ונטפל בזה.
שומעים אותי?
הנה יגאל עלה, מה העניינים יגאל?
בסדר, שומע אותי?
שומעים אותך.
שומעים אותך, כן. חכים עוד כמה דקות, יגאל, אנשים
אין בעיה, אין בעיה בכלל.
אתה רוצה קצת לספר איך הגעת לפלורנד, איך הגעת, תספר קצת על השתלשלות האירועים, מבחינתך לפחות.
כמה אנשים איתנו עכשיו?
כרגע יש לנו 30 אנשים.
כבר בזום אני רואה רק 3-4.
תעשה סקרול ימינה שמאלה, אתה בטח בטלפון, לא?
לא, אני הבנתי, אני רואה. חשבתי אני יכול לראות את כולם ביחד.
עוד מעט תפסוק.
אוקיי, איך הגעתי לזה? בוא, מתי זה היה? זה היה...
בוא תציג את עצמך קודם, שידעו על מי מדובר, כי לא כולם מכירים אותך.
יגאל סוויסה, סיפיל. רובכם בטח כבר ראה אותי. מתי זה היה? זה היה בספטמבר, שנה שעברה. זה היה בספטמבר, משום, אין לי מושג, אני אפילו לא זוכר איך הגעתי לזה. ראיתי בקבוקים שלהם באקסצ'יינג', וסתם עניין אותי לדעת מה זה. שם נכנסתי לאתר, שלחתי הודעה, ואת האמת, העסקה הייתה כבר סגורה מספטמבר, אוקטובר, שנה שעברה. זה כבר היה סגור, זה היה אחרי יום כיפור, סגרתי את העסקה אחרי יום כיפורים שנה שעברה. אוקטובר, נובמבר זה כבר היה סגור, פשוט לא חשבתי שזה הזמן המתאים. שנה שעברה, בשנה הזאת עברנו הרבה, כן? אבל לא חשבתי שלפני שנה זה משהו שיתאים לארץ, רציתי להתמקד יותר בוויסקי. איך אנה, מה נשמע? הרבה זמן. רציתי להתמקד יותר בוויסקי מאשר להתחיל להביא ארורים. עכשיו התנאים בשלו עכשיו, העסק גדל. יש יותר לקוחות, יותר אנשים שמעוניינים בדברים. בשנה האחרונה העסק גדל דרמטית. זה ממש יפה, גם מבחינת הלקוחות שמגיעים, לקוחות יותר יגאל, מה המצב?
מה נשמע?
וואלה, אחי, הרבה זמן.
ים זמן.
ים. אז זהו, אז שנה, העסק גדל יפה בשנה האחרונה, הרבה לקוחות חדשים, הרבה אנשים שכביכול לא היו קונים באינטרנט, ופתאום עכשיו בגלל הקורונה באו לקנות, ראו, הציצו, נכנסו, אהבו את השירות, אהבו את המגוון, אהבו את המחירים, זה לקוחות שמבינים, עוד פעם, זה לא לקוחות אתה יודע, זה אנשים שרוצים לשתות טוב, אנשים שהיו בחו"ל, עכשיו הקורונה מנעה מהם לטוס לחו"ל, אנשים כבר 6-7 חודשים כבר לא טסו, זה אנשים שהיו טסים, מביאים בקבוקים, אתה יודע, אני מגיע לבתים של אנשים, אני רואה את המגוון, אתה רואה שזה בקבוקים שקונים בארץ. אז אתה מבין שוואלה, והקהל זה לא האחרון, המצב.
מאוד מאוד נרחב, הבאת נדמה לי 14 מוצרים שונים, נכון?
כן, אמרתי, בוא, הנה עכשיו הוא גם שלח לי את הבקבוקים האחרים, יש שם עוד כמה מעניינים, מברזיל, מעוד כמה מקומות, אבל עכשיו זה הזמן המתאים, הבאתי 14 סוגים, אני מאמין במגוון, לא, אין מה להביא 2-3 בקבוקים ולרוץ איתם, תביא מגוון, אחד אוהב זה, כמו בסיגנטורי, דוגלס לן, 17-18 תוויות מגיעות בדוגלס לן, כל משטר זה 16-17 תוויות, חוץ מהרג'ונל, אתה יודע, כל אחד מוצא לעצמו את המקום שלו, כל אחד מוצא את הוויסקי שנוח לו, במקום לבוא לרוץ רק עם הרג'ונל מאלט, מבחינה עסקית הרבה יותר שווה לרוץ עם הרג'ונל מאלט, זה אני אומר, זה סטרייט אאוט.
קונסנזוס, יותר להכריח הממוצע.
בדיוק, במקום להביא 1,500 בקבוקים מ-20 אקספרשנים, אתה מביא 1,500 מ-5 אקספרשנים, אתה מבין? אתה הופך את זה 3, 4, 5 שנים, אתה הופך את זה כבר למוצר שנמצא בכל חנות. אבל גם זה יבוא, אבל אני אם חנות לא ככה, אני נכנס סחורה, אם חנות לא ככה נכנס סחורה ויושבת לחודש-חודשיים בחנות, לא יזמין ממך יותר. הוא לא יזמין. צריך שאנשים יכירו, והיום אנשים מכירים. יודעים מה זה רג'ונל מאלט, יודעים מה זה דוגלס לן. אז עכשיו הזמן לרום, ויש גם פורט בדרך לארץ, יין פורט.
בסוף אתה תספר לנו קצת מה מומים, מה יש לנו בסל, מה בדרך, תעשה לנו קצת טיזר.
כן. אני יכול להגיד שפורט בדרך, פורט זה עניין של כמה ימים, אבל זה פורט שאין דבר כזה בארץ. אין, מה שמביאים, אני מוכר את מה שמביאים. והדברים שהציונים של הבקבוקים האלו קיבלו זה לגמרי, פאקינג יין פורט, כמו שפורט צריך להיות.
I'm here.
מה זה?
Igal, this is Florent.
פלורנט, איפה הוא?
Hey, good evening, Florent. How are you?
A lot of people tonight. Impressive.
So just will say a few words in Hebrew and then we'll introduce you, okay?
Okay, no worries. Sorry.
No issue. אוקיי, יגאל, אתה רוצה להציג את פלורן, לספר עליו?
כן, אני רק אמצא אותו, שנייה, אני אמצא אותו, אני עושה סקרול.
הוא נמצא בדף השני.
הנה, אני רואה אותו. היי פלורן, how are you doing? אוקיי, אני אגיד בעברית, I will speak in Hebrew for a few seconds, אוקיי? חברים, זה פלורן, זה המבקבק העצמאי, זה הבחור שבעצם הוא המותג, הוא בוחר את החביות, מבקבק, תפסתי אותו יום אחד בשיחת וואטסאפ, וידאו וואטסאפ, ראיתי אותו במחסן, כאילו מבקבק בקבוקים, זה הבן אדם שמאחורי כל הדבר הזה שנקרא Company Days in Days. זהו, פחות או יותר. Florent, I told everybody that you are the man behind the brand, like you're doing everything, pick, choose, butter the butters and ship me to Israel a DHL package. Yeah, he's the man behind the brand. And it's really very appreciated independent butler. I spoke, I told you who did I spoke to, yes, Florent, last week?
Yes.
Keep it. I spoke and he wanted to know, I'm thinking about bringing another brand of whiskey to Israel, and he asked me, who do I bring to Israel right now? So I said, Signatory, Douglas Lane, Company Days in Days, and the guy was like, wow, I'm a big fan of Days in Days. I mean, and this is a champion in whiskey. I mean, the things that he does, it's amazing. And he told me he's a big fan of you. Anyway, I'll let you talk right now. Now it's your turn.
Perfect. Well, good evening, everybody. Bonsoir, tout le monde. So I'm going to do it in English. If you prefer, I can do it in French. That'd be easier for me, but no, I know it's tricky. This year, it's a bit of a weird year for all of us. Normally, I'm used to do this in front of people, and that's usually much more fun. I think it's the cool part of the job, meeting people and getting to introduce them to the brand, getting them to understand the rum world better. So tonight I'm gonna give you a bit about my background, why I started a brand called Compagnie des Indes, which is a small company. We're only 4 people working in the company. I'm gonna try to educate you a bit more about rum, because sometimes rum can be seen as a spirit which is not so interesting, but hopefully tasting the 6 different rums tonight, I will make you travel a bit. And finally, remember, there are no stupid questions. So if anybody wants to ask a question, I think it might be easier if you write it down in the comments. I think there is a comment, a little thing where you can comment. And I guess after the presentation, or maybe during the presentation, we will go through the question and I will try to ask them, to answer them at the same time than they're being asked. Once again, do not hesitate to ask questions. You might not be a rum expert. I'm supposed to be a rum expert, so any questions you have, feel free to ask them, okay? No stupid question. If it is about the raw products, the type of wood we're using for a barrel, or if even you don't know what exactly accounts for a rum, I'm going to try to tell all of this, but once again, do not hesitate to ask questions. So I hope I won't be too boring tonight. So just to give you a little about my background, I come from Burgundy, where I am right now, in Dijon, the city of the mustard, famous for the mustard, but also our offices are in Beaune, and Beaune is kind of the capital of the Burgundy wines. And I did all my studies in the wine business. My dad was in the wine business, and I was more likely to work normally in the wine business, but I felt in love with the spirit business. What I say usually is that I kind of moved to the dark side of the force, which means from the wine business to the spirit business, which is a different style of business. But what I liked about spirits is that contrary to wines, wines are a beautiful, beautiful product. Wine is food. I will always have wine with food, with dinner, and there are wines produced all over the world. But what I loved with spirits is this idea of innovation. You can distill whatever you want. You can ferment it. You can age it in barrels. You can distill in different ways. All these things made me really, they caught my attention, and that's why I felt in love with the rum world, with the spirit world, and more typically in the rum world. Why the rum world? Well, because from 2011 to 2013, I actually lived in New York for a year and a half, basically, and I was in charge of a brand of rum called Banks Rum. At the time, that was an independent brand owned by small entrepreneurs. Nowadays, it's been sold to Bacardi, but when I worked for the brand, they were still independent. And when I was there in New York, it was impressive to see how people were knowledgeable about rum, how people were mixing rum in cocktails, especially the bartenders. And when I moved back to France, that was early 2013, I realized that the market in Europe for rum was booming, but that unfortunately, people were drinking rum, which I don't feel were very honest. And I kind of wanted to educate people towards real rum and drinking honest rums. In Burgundy, we talk a lot about terroir. I don't know if you guys have heard about this word. This is a French word we use, especially in wines usually, but a terroir is the combination of the climate, the know-how, the tradition of producing a wine, and the grape varietal and the soil and all those things. Well, which means terroir from one wine producing country to another, or even little pieces of land separated by 100 meters one from each other, they produce different style of wines. Well, this is the same idea with spirits, with rum in general. Rum can be produced in so many countries all over the world that when you think about it, every rum should be different one from another. And that was the idea of starting Compagnie des Indes, making terroir rums which are representative of their terroir of origin, of the place where they are produced, either Jamaica, Fiji, St. Lucia. Yes, that was the idea, making specific rums which showcase the honesty of the product from where they are, of the country where they are from. Most of people were drinking entry-level rums when I started the brand, and most of those rums were kind of tricked. Tricked means they contained colorings, they contain flavorings, they contain sugar, and sometimes some vanilla extract or even glycerol. So I did some analysis of the different rums on the market, and I realized that most of the rums were not very honest, but knowing that the world of rum is the world of pirates, that felt pretty normal. So I didn't want it to be a pirate, I wanted to educate. And when I did my first rum festival in Paris, that was 2014, I remember people would come to my stand, to my booth, and they would taste my rum. And we would taste 5, 6 different rums, like tonight. I would pour the rums, and I would tell them, if I put sugar in my rums, I will always tell my consumer. And for the Caraïbes, which we are going to have later on tonight, as well as the Jamaica 5-year-old, I will explain how much sugar there is in it. But when people were coming to the booth and they were asking, I was like, oh yeah, so this rum contains a bit of sugar. And they were like, oh, but why do you add sugar to your rums? And I was like, well, in fact, I might be one of the one adding the less sugar compared to most of the rums you might taste on this trade show. So you should go ask other people if they put sugar in their rums. And from then it started a kind of a momentum with some bloggers and journalists in Europe, in France. I won't say that I was the first one to start it, but there were already people questioning the big brands about the color, about the flavors. And so it made people had to be, the producer, they had to be more honest with the rum they were offering and to be at least more transparent about what they were putting in their rums. So that's a bit of the idea. So the rum, always honest, everything which is written on the label, this is what's in the bottle. And when there is sugar in the rums, I always tell my consumers. So that's about my background, and that's how I started the brand 6 years ago. In the range, you will see tonight we will taste 6 rums. There are 3 blends and 3 single casks. The blends I can reproduce every year. 1 year after another, you can find, for example, a Tricorn or Caraïbe. Those rums I reproduce every year. Then after, we will taste the single cask, and the single cask, they are all unique, which means one single cask, 300, 400 bottles, and when it's done, it's done. Igal, can you cut your mic, please?
I am unmuted. It's not me.
Ah, no, okay, but Igal, because Igal, we can hear you talking.
Ah, I'm talking to my wife.
Yeah, okay.
Anyway, so blends and single cask, that's what we're going to try tonight. First of all, so that you understand better, I am not a rum distiller. I am what we call an independent bottler. You might have heard about this name in the whiskey world. If we talk about Signature Vintage, if we talk about Gordon and MacPhail, Douglas Lang, all those guys, they are what we call an independent bottler, which means we select rum bottler or whiskey bottlers. We select rums from all over we select whiskeys. I select rums from all over the world. I bring those rums in France. I have my own warehouse. I will show you a picture afterwards. I age my rums. I filter them. I put them in barrels. I empty the barrels. I dilute. I blend. I bottle. I do everything in-house. But I don't distill. So my job is only about selecting, working with the best distilleries in the world, selecting the best rums in the world, bringing them in France, aging them, bottling them, and selling them. That's the idea. It's about a bit like a cheese maker. You know, you buy the cheese from let's say the gentleman with the cow. You take the milk, you make the cheese, and then you brush it or you age it, and then you release it. Well, I do the same with the rums. Selecting rums, bringing them, aging them, bottling them in an honest way. Just let me share. I think I can share my screen. Yeah. So let me share my screen so I can show you some pictures.
You can share your screen, Florent.
Yeah, I think I can. Yeah, it's perfect. Thank you so much. Let me see. Okay, should be this one. Oops. Okay. Can you see the screen?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So now, okay. Are we on the slide which says quality control of our stock and production? Yes, you can see some pictures. Yeah, okay. Yeah. I can see Django saying yes. Thank you, Django. So quality control of our stock. Once again, as I said, aging process, everything is done in-house, which means we can taste the barrels every month, every year, and we decide when a barrel has reached its peak and it's ready to be bottled. We do everything in-house also in terms of coopering, cooperage with the barrels, which means sometimes we use barrels which are new. We put the rum in a new barrel, which is usually an American oak barrel or French oak barrel. Sometimes we will reuse an ex-rum barrel, and sometimes we also do finishes, which means putting the rum in a barrel which had previously some some Sauterne, some port wine, some sherry wine, all those things. Filtration. Filtration is very important. We do filtration in-house, but we don't do cold filtration. The big multinational, usually they do cold filtration. Why? Because cold filtration removes some essential oils, and those essential oils, when you put your bottle of rum in the fridge, sometimes the rum or the whiskey will turn cloudy. If it does, it means that it is a good product. Why? Because it means the liquid still contains some essential oils, which usually carry flavors. And those essential oils, if you do cold filtration, you remove them. And by removing some essential oils, of course, you remove flavors. Next, dilution of our rum. Same thing, we do in-house dilution. Dilution is very important. Why? Because by diluting your rum too quickly, you can create some bad flavors, what we call some off flavors. So that's important for us to dilute slowly, little by little. But anyway, I'll talk about this further. You can see some of my barrels of rum on the pictures, and you can see also a kind of a little device that we're using to measure the alcohol content of the rum in a barrel. So for example, the barrel that I was filtering here, that I was tasting here, was around 64% ABV. Here are some pictures of the way we work. As you can see, this is pretty artisanal. This is craft. We do everything. Again, we touch the barrel, we move them, we filter. You can see here a type of filter we use, and this kind of black dust that you see at the bottom is what is inside the barrel. When we take the barrel upside down in the bucket here, then the remaining liters are filtered through this type of paper, and those are the little pieces of charcoal which are inside the wood, because usually using an American wood barrel, charred, burnt inside, you get some charcoal, and with the aging, after 10 years, there's a pieces of charcoal which goes at the bottom of the cask, and that's why we do filter, but we only filter through this kind of cartridge filters, which remove only the little pieces of wood, but not the flavors. That's pretty important. Sorry, I talk a lot, so I know you guys want to taste. Let's go into the tasting now. So I know all the rums by heart. I'm not going to taste them with you tonight, but I can talk about them. Of course, I had them quite a lot. We will start with Tricorn, which is the first rum you have. It should be the white rum, easy to find. So I'll tell you a bit the story behind this blend. So first of all, we start with a white rum, which contains no sugar, which is not very usual. A lot of white rums, which are made for mixology or for cocktails, they have a bit of sugar, because it is difficult to find a white rum which is smooth enough to be bottled like this with no sugar. My idea with when creating this specific white rum was to create a white rum which can be which could be mixed in cocktails without losing its flavors. Like a good cuisine, like a good chef, the bartenders, when they make a cocktail, they want to create a good balance. If you make a mojito, let's take an example. I'm sure everybody knows the cocktail, the mojito. If you make a mojito and you take a cheap white rum, a white rum which has no flavor, very quickly you will have trouble balancing the flavors of your cocktails. So like when you do a caprese salad, you know, the famous Italian salad, which includes tomato, mozzarella, and olive oil. If you make a caprese salad with mozzarella, which has no flavor, and tomatoes, which have no flavor, basically your caprese salad will only taste like olive oil, salt, and pepper. If you take good products from the beginning, then you create a beautiful harmony in your mouth. And that was the idea with Compagnie des Indes, the Tricorn. When you mix it in a cocktail, this white rum being powerful and because it has some kick, it will help the cocktail to have a structure. So most of the time, people, when they do a mojito, they take a cheap white rum and they put more rum in the cocktail. But if you put more rum, which has no flavor, the only thing you're gonna get is you're gonna increase the alcohol content of your cocktail, but you're not gonna increase the flavors. And if you use a white rum which has no flavor, your mojito will likely taste only sugar, citrus, and mint. But you won't get this nice backbone of a greedy, full-bodied rum. So in order to get this powerful white rum, I mixed the 3 styles of rums from the world. In the world, you can produce rum either from molasses. Molasses, this is basically when you make sugar, the powder sugar, the crystal sugar. This is made in a sugar refinery, and whatever is condensed, whatever cannot be transformed into crystallized sugar is a dark paste, which we call molasses. And because this molasses still contains some saccharose, we will use it, mix it with water, ferment it, and distill it, which makes rum. Another style of rum is called rum agricole, which are usually produced in the French Caribbean, Guadeloupe, Martinique, La Réunion. Those fresh sugarcane juice rum, the rum agricole, they are made out of freshly pressed sugarcane juice. So we ferment the sugarcane juice straight away, right after crushing the sugarcane. Whereas when you make molasses rum, you take this sugarcane juice, you heat it up, you mix, you transform it as a syrup, and you make crystallized sugar out of it. In the rum agricole way, you only take the sugar straight away, you ferment and you distill. And one old technique which was used in Indonesia 800 years before Christ is called the Batavia Arak. Batavia Arak is the rum produced in Indonesia. The only difference is that in order to start the fermentation, they use molasses also, but to start the fermentation, they put red rice, you know, the rice we eat normally, red rice in the fermentation tank. And this red rice contains some little yeast on its skin, and those little yeast will help the fermentation to start. It gives a real character to this specific Indonesian rum. There is only 5% of Indonesian rum in this Tricon blend. The rest are rums from Trinidad and Tobago, La Réunion, Barbados. So a mix of different origins, a mix of different rums from the world to create a beautiful white rum bottled at 43% ABV, 43 because if I had bottled it at 40% ABV, it would be too soft to be mixed in the cocktails. So 43 is a great balance for this rum. Once again, this is a rum which is mostly made, I made it because some bartenders from Sweden and Italy, they asked me for a mixing rum, but you can also sip it like this and it would be also very, very interesting. I'm gonna try to get, if there are questions, I cannot see them, but feel free to ask them in the meantime. Are there some questions?
If people have questions, they will put it in the chat and I will ask you the questions, okay?
Okay, perfect. So far, no question.
So far, no.
Okay. Maybe when people drink a bit more, they will get less shy and ask more questions. Well, if there are no questions about Tricon, I guess we can move to the next one, Caraïbes. Once again, this white rum, if you want cocktails, I recommend a mojito. I recommend a daiquiri, which are two of the most the well-known rum cocktails in the world. And there is a twist on the regular daiquiri, which is called the Hemingway daiquiri, which accounts for pink grapefruit juice, maraschino liquor, so basically a cherry liquor, citrus, lime juice, and rum, white rum. That's a pretty good cocktail, the Hemingway daiquiri.
So Florent, I don't know if you answered it, maybe I missed it. Did you explain about the origin of the name, Compagnie des Indes? Why did you choose this name?
No, I didn't. It's a good question. So when I had to start the brand, I was reading a lot about rums, books, sorry, about rums. And a name which very often was coming through the history of rum was the name of the West Indies companies. The West Indies companies, they were basically created, the British one, the Dutch one, as well as the French and Portuguese one. They were created as exporting companies. They were supposed to export products from the mainland to the colonies around the world. But very quickly, they realized that nobody was interested in those products from the mainland. However, on the other way around, people in the mainland were very interested in having some spices, some gems, some fabrics, some specific things which you could only find in the colonies back in the in their home country. And so that's why the West Indies companies, they ended up being importing companies, and most of them were already importing rums during the 17th century. And that's also the idea of which I wanted to give through my brand, to make it look like it has always existed, but in fact it is only, I mean, it's only started 6 years ago, but when you see the design of the drawings on the labels and things, it reminds us about the discoveries of the New World, the discovering of what we call what we used to call the Indies, either the West or the East Indies, and Compagnie des Indes translate for West Indies companies.
Okay, one more question that I got is about what is your preferred rum glass, and what do you suggest the best for tasting rum?
So I don't have one here, sorry about this, but there could be 2 or 3 different glasses, but basically they are for sipping only, there are glasses with what we call which create a reflux, which means glasses which on the top they come back, they close back on the top because it creates a reflux in the glass, and the flavors, so the lighter alcohol, they stay in the glass, they don't come to your nose straight away. So one thing is about using always the same glass when you taste different spirits, because from one glass to another it can make differences in spirits. So if you want to compare spirits, always try it with the same glasses at home. And then when you taste a spirit, don't do like with wines, where with wine, you know, we take the thing and we do like this. Well, don't do like this with spirits, because if you do like this, the first things which comes out of the glass is alcohol. The lighter esters, the lighter alcohols will comes out, and if you put your nose straight away on top of it, it will smell very harsh. Whereas if you turn if you don't turn it, but if you turn the liquid in the glass, so you turn the glass like this and make the liquid roll on the sides of the glass, and then you let it oxidize and you put your nose on top of it, that's the best way of tasting a rum also. But in terms of glasses, Glencairn glasses, the whiskey glasses would work very well. Just don't use the cognac glasses, you know, the very large, the short, they have a short foot and they are very large like this. Don't use those glasses, they are the worst for tasting spirits.
Okay, thank you.
No, okay, perfect. No more questions so far?
No, I think we can move to the second round.
Perfect. So let's move on to Caraïbes, which is the second one on the presentation. So Caraïbes is the first rum that I ever released, with Compagnie des Indes. This one was, the idea was to introduce people to a rum which is well balanced, which is easy enough to be shared with friends, and which yet is not too expensive or too tricked, because a lot of competitors in the same price range, a lot of brands in the same price range they would have a very dark color, which most of the time is the reminiscence of coloring. They will be very sugary, and they will taste a lot like vanilla. Well, because people, when they think about rum, they think because a spirit is made with sugarcane, it has to be sugary. But keep in mind, any spirit which comes out of a still, any liquid which comes out of a still, do not contain any sugar. So why? Because sugar is not volatile. Alcohol is volatile. That's the principle of distillation, but sugar is not volatile, which means if you have sugar in a liquid which you are distilling, which was fermented, if there is still sugar in the fermented liquid, even though you distill it, the sugar will stay in the still, in the pot still or in the column still, because it is too heavy to go through the still and the swan neck. So every spirit which comes out of a still do not contain sugar, which means normally a whiskey, of course, doesn't contain sugar, a vodka, a Pierre Eau de Vie, whatever. If there is sugar in those spirits, it means people have added them afterwards. People have added the sugar afterwards. And of course, sugar is the most addictive drug in the world. Our body needs sugar. So whenever we eat sugar, whenever we drink sugar, well, our brain tells us, well, sugar is good for you. Have some more, have some more. That's why when we sodas, sweets, it's very difficult to stop, because once we start, we want more, we want more. Well, by putting sugar in rum, this acts the same way, but also the fact that sugar is a flavor fixative. So the more sugar you put in a rum or in a spirit, the longer you will have the impression to keep the spirit in your mouth, because the molecules of sugar, they will stick the molecules of flavors in your mouth. Imagine a syrup, for example, a strawberry syrup. If you take just the strawberry syrup like this, a tiny sip, you will keep it in your mouth 5-10 minutes, because the sugar sticks the flavors of strawberry in your mouth. Well, this is the same. So if you take a rum which is very badly distilled, in which you put coloring, in which you put vanilla extract, and in which you put sugar, well, you make a very flavorful, addicting rum, but in fact, this is all fake flavors. Well, that was not my philosophy. So Caraïbe contains 15 grams of sugar. It's organic cane syrup. So it comes from the sugar cane, it goes into a sugar cane spirit. And Caraïbe is a blend of 3 origins. First of all, you get Barbados, 25% rums from Barbados. Bajan rums, they are powerful. This is the structure of the blend. Then there are 50% rums from Trinidad and Tobago. Trinidad and Tobago, there are light rums, a bit lighter rums, more on the fruity and floral flavors. So I build with those Trinidad and Tobago rums around the spine, which is Barbados. And finally, 25% rums from Guyana, British Guyana. There is only one distillery over there. Those rums are called Demerara rums, because all the sugar is called Demerara sugar, and all the molasses we use is Demerara molasses, and those rums are very powerful and spicy and smoky. So the 25% really helps the blend to get a nice long finish. So 15 grams of sugar per liter. This is the maximum I put in my rums. So Caraïbe is 15 grams, Latino is 15 grams, and the next one we're going to try, Jamaica, is 10 grams only. To give you an idea, some competitors, they put up to 80 grams of sugar per liter. However, the European Union law from next year on will ban any spirits to be called rum if it contains more than 20 grams of sugar per liter. So 7 years after I started, I'm happy to see that finally there will be a real regulation around rum, and that people which have been cheating for so long will have to get to follow the rules from now on. So Caraïbe, it's an easygoing rum. It's well made. It's honest. This is the kind of rum I call the rum for friends, because it's easy to introduce your friends to drink this rum. You can share it with them. If they are just beginners, normally beginners find this rum easy to sip and pretty flavorful. So there is no age statement on this one. It is aged between 3 and 5 years old. But in order not to laze my consumer, not to lie to my consumer, I don't put an age on this one because it varies. And remember, the blends, either Tricorn, Caraïbe, Latino, Jamaica, they might be a little bit different from one year to another. Because when I blend 5, 10 barrels this year, it might be different than when I blend the 5, 10 barrels of next year's. So this is the idea of craftsmanship. This is small production, but this is also the beauty behind small batches and small quantities. I guess there might be some questions.
Yeah, so one question is, what is the percentage of Barbados in this blend?
In Caraïbe, the percentage of Barbados is 25%.
Okay, and my question is, I guess that adding sugar should be limited. So why do you think that we still need to add sugar even for entry-level rums? They will not do well without the sugar, you think?
Okay, well, that's a good question. When I started, the market was not yet ready to drink rums which did not contain any sugar. And in the price range in which I am competing with this Caraïbe, most of rums contains a lot of sugar. So the idea by adding a touch of sugar in those entry level, the idea was to re-educate the palate of consumer so that they would get used to drink rums with less sugar in order to move to the rum, which we will see afterwards, basically the single cask or some of my blends also, with no sugar. But this is the in-between when people started with very sugary rums, then after a little while, they get tired of it because too much sugar, you know, you get tired of it. Then they move to the rum with a bit less sugar. And finally, when there is no more, when people cannot have sugar anymore, they move to the single cask with no sugar.
Okay, but I guess that some people will get, you know, accustomed to rum being sweet. So some of them will not be able to progress to the next level because they will say, okay, this rum was easier for me. So I wonder why the European Union is not saying, okay, we must abolish sugar altogether and rum should be like whiskey, it should include nothing other than rum.
Well, so the European Union only allows, as of next year, 20 grams of sugar per liter, but you're right. In the market of rum, new rum lovers, I'd say 50% of them will stick to the rums which are sugary because they are the rums they like, and that's okay. To me, it's okay to put sugar in the rum as long as you are honest to the consumer and you tell them exactly what's inside. What I feel is dishonest is when people make consumer thinks that their rum is naturally amazingly smooth, but that in fact it's because they have been added products. So if you tell people what you do, it's okay with me. And there are people which like sugary rums, it's no big deal. But yeah, I think it's about honesty and telling people what's in the product so that people, they can compare within the same type of products.
Okay, one more question about the first one. Was it aged or it's non-aged at all?
No, it's a good question. It's actually aged a bit. There is a portion of rums which are aged in the tricorn, and they are what we call charcoal filtered, which means we remove the color, but we keep the flavors. And this technique of charcoal filtration is a technique I've learned when I worked for the brand of rum before in New York, because it was also white rum, which was charcoal filtered. This technique is the idea of keeping flavors of a dark rum in a white rum so that when you mix this white rum in a cocktail like a daiquiri, for example, your daiquiri stays beautiful, clean, and, you know, yellowish, greenish, instead of turning brownish, which is not very pleasant in terms of flavor, of color, and of course it makes you think it's not good.
Okay, interesting. I was sure it was unaged because of the color. Okay.
Other questions?
I think that we've covered the questions, so we can move on. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, perfect. What was I going to say? Next one. Next one is Jamaica, another blend. another blend from only one distillery this time. The two previous blends, Tricorn and Caraïbe, they were, what's the name? They were...
So we're talking about the Jamaica 5-year-old, just sorry?
Yes, sorry. So this one, the Jamaica...
This is number 4, not number 3, so just people will not mistake.
Ah, okay. Which one is number 3?
Number 3 is the Dominican Republic 8-year-old.
Ah, okay. Okay, sorry. So we will do a single cask, and then we will come... No, actually, it's true. It's better in that order. So next one is this one, right? Dominican Republic 8-year-old.
Yeah.
Perfect. So Dominican Republic 8-year-old is a single cask. So you will see the difference between rum with a touch of sugar and rum with no sugar. This one, it's pretty easy. Basically, all the informations, they are on the label. That's the idea of the transparency. That's the idea that I want people to understand exactly what's in the bottle from looking at it. And you can also look like a very knowledgeable person, a very well-educated rum person when friends are over, because you know exactly what's in the bottle when you serve the bottle to your friends. But basically, so this is the other part of the range. The two before, there were blends I can reproduce. This one, the Dominican 8-year-old, I cannot reproduce. And you will see all the information, they are written on the label. I have another rum here. Once again, you see another single cask. Every information is on the label. So you have the distillation date, you have the bottling date, the origin. Here it's a blend of different origins. 10-year-old, the name of the distillery. Well, here it's a blend of different distilleries. The reference of the cask, the number of this bottle, the number of all the bottles made with the cask, and the alcohol content. So with one barrel, I can only make, for example, the Dominican Republic is 378 bottles. That's it. When it's finished, it's finished. I cannot reproduce it. Like if you take, for example, Chivas, which is a very well-known Scotch whiskey, Chivas Regal, they have a 12-year-old Chivas. If you buy it this year, you can find it next year, you can find it the year after. Well, with me, you buy Dominican Republic 8-year-old this year, you cannot find it anymore. Next year, I won't produce it anymore. Next year, there might be Barbados 12 years old, there might be Fiji 17 years old, there might be, I don't know, El Salvador 12 years old. So every year I change offering, every year I change the origins, I change the distilleries I source from and the ages. It might happen that in 3 years, you will find another Dominican Republic from Compagnie des Indes, but it might be also an 8-year-old. But of course, that's a different one. But once again, it's easy for you to find because everything is written on the label. So from this rum, it is distilled in a distillery which is called AFD. Why am I blocking with the name of the distillery? AFD. Alcoholes Finos. Oh la la, my Spanish is getting rusted. Anyway, this is a distillery which produces what's the name? Sorry, the Barcelo brand. I don't know if you know Barcelo. I don't know if it is available in Israel, but this is the distillery producing Barcelo. So those guys, I select some rums from them. This is column distillation over there. So no pods distillation, only column still. Molasses based, age 6 years in the country of origin and 2 years within my warehouse. So for this one, it's pretty easy. There are around 200 liters in the barrel. I take those liters, I filter them, I dilute, because the rum in the barrel was around, basically for this one, it was around 62% ABV. So I diluted to 43% ABV, and then I bottle it. When I do my dilution, something very important, dilution is a key point in the flavor of your rum, in the smoothness of your spirit in the mouth. We dilute our spirits over a period of 1 month. We dilute our blends or our single cask over a period of 1 month. Why? Because, as I said earlier, when you mix water and alcohol, if you do it too quickly, it creates friction between the molecules and it creates something very harsh, very like burning. If you do it slowly, little by little, you create a beautiful harmony between the molecules, which instead of fighting against each other, will marry together. So that's why when we add water, we put 1/3 of water, we let the product rest, we mixed, we blend basically, we let it rest for 1 week. We add another 1/3 of water, let it rest, mix, then another 1/3 of water 1 week later, and then once everything is done, we let it rest for another week, and finally we bottle. So that's also very important in the quality of your product. Dominican Republic, it's mostly, of course, what we call a Latin style rum. Most of the time, Latin style rums, they have this impression of being more sweeter than ex-British colonies, than British style rums. So Latin style rums, why? Because they use new American oak most of the time, instead of British style rums, which use ex-bourbon barrel. So if you take a new American oak, because it had no spirits before in it, the liquid is more likely to extract the natural vanilla molecules which are contained in the barrel. Whereas if you put the rum in an ex-bourbon barrel, it's the bourbon which first of all extracted those flavors, as well as the color. And then when you put the rum in it, after you emptied the bourbon, the rum is less likely to taste these vanilla flavors. So that's why most of the time, Spanish style rums are usually smoother, a bit more vanilla, and a bit more sweeter in terms of flavors, not in terms of sugar content, but in terms of flavors than British style rums. So Dominican Republic 8-year-old, I'd say it's for beginners, which wants to go further after the blends and want to discover something more refined, a bit more specific, but not so dry and powerful.
Okay. Florent, I think one point maybe you can touch on is the aging, because most of the people are more whiskey people, so they know that aging can only be done in Scotland to be called a Scotch. In rum, it's a bit different, so maybe you can expand on that.
Good point. So Scotland is, in order to be called Scotch, whiskey, every Scotch is a whiskey, every whiskey is not a Scotch. So Scotch whiskey is regulated by the Scotch Whisky Association, and if you want to sell a Scotch whiskey, you have to buy it from a Scotch distillery or Scotch independent bottler. It has to be fermented, distilled, aged in Scotland, and bottled in Scotland. Whereas rum, it's a lot of different countries in the world which can produce rum, and all of them, they have different ways of producing rum. So this is why this is kind of a pirate's world, because so many people have so many regulations that they cannot combine all the regulation to make only one. But basically, rum, the difference is rum can be called rum as soon as it comes out of the still, whereas whiskey can be called whiskey, mostly all over the world, if it has spent at least, depending on origins, but at least 2 years in a barrel. So rum can be called rum if it's white or if it's dark. Whiskey mostly can only be called whiskey if it's aged in barrels. So aged in Scotland for Scotch whiskies. For rum, being the world of pirates, be careful about aging in the rum business. Why? Because there are big multinationals which created some cool marketing tools to make you think you are buying a product which is older than what you think. For example, I give you a very easy example, the Sistema Solera. If you like rums, if you buy rum sometimes, you might have came across some rums which on the label says Sistema Solera 23 or Sistema Solera 15. The Sistema Solera is it's a technique used in the sherry business which means you mix, it's a pyramid of cask, and every year you mix the casks in between each other. And at the end, you have an average of, for example, 15 years old, because you mixed a sherry from 30-year-old with a sherry of 2 years old. Well, in the rum business, they created this cool marketing tool so that when you see a 23 on the label, you think the rum is 23-year-old, but in fact, there might be 2% of 23-year-old. So be careful about this. Sistema Solera, if you see Sistema Solera on the label, run away, because basically we're trying to sell you something which is much younger than what it appears. Most of consumers, they are used to see, if you are a Scotch drinker, if you see a number on a bottle, you are used to think that it has to be the minimum age. So aging in Scotch whiskey, if you want to call a Scotch whiskey 12-year-old, you have to prove that minimum aging of the whiskey in the bottle is 12-year-old. Whereas in the rum world, especially in the Sistema world, this is the contrary. You can put the age of the oldest distillery on the label. And of course, people, they will put a drop of 23-year-old and make you think you're buying a 23-year-old. Same thing, the mentioned XO, like in the cognac business. XO only has a legal value if it is a rum produced in Martinique. If it's a rum produced in Guatemala, for example, or in Barbados, XO means nothing. It means nothing. It could be a 1-year-old rum with a lot of coloring inside. You could put XO, because XO means nothing if it is not bottled within a protected area like Martinique. So be careful in terms of aging in the rum world. It is the rum of pirates. Some brands you can trust, but some others, especially the big multinational, they always make you think you're buying something which is more exclusive than what it is actually. Are there some other questions?
There is a question regarding the aging in tropical versus aging in European. So Liran is asking, why is this one aged 6 years in the origin country and then more further years in Europe, and not the entirety in the origin country? And what is, what's the effect of it?
Mm-hmm. Well, most of the time I like to bring in the rums once I bought them, because you never know with the pirates if they will keep the rum. So that's why, for example, this one was aged part in the Caribbean, part in, part in Europe. There is a big thing going on around the world of rum nowadays between continental aging and tropical aging. I think both styles are great. There are beautiful rums in both styles. Only problem with tropical aging, especially with big distilleries like the one which produced this Dominican Republic rum, they produce so much. They put the rum in the barrels and then they rely on the barrel to give flavors to the rum, because the rums at the beginning, they are not so flavorful. But they have so many rums, like 50,000 barrels in stock, that they cannot taste every barrel every week or every month or every 2 or 6 months. So they have a big parcel of rum, of barrels. They say, okay, let's take all those barrels and we will bottle this rum as an 8-year-old rum. Problem is, there might be some very good cask within those barrels, and there might be some very bad cask. And especially in the Caribbean, the concentration of the wood within the liquid is much more powerful. So if you don't taste your cask often enough, you can end up with a liquid which basically tastes like wood juice. Because if your liquid was not flavorful enough at the beginning to stand out within the flavors of wood, well, you end up with something which is dry, which is bitter, and which has no flavor. That's why most of the people, most of the big distilleries from the Caribbean, then they add sugar and they sell it, but all they want is the aging. So they don't make something very honest. If you are an independent bottler and you select a cask which was aged only in the tropics, you can find some amazing products. But aging in Europe also helps to have the spirit to confit over a more longer period of time and to get something more elegant. I've always, and then, I mean, of course, I'm an independent bottler and I age most of my spirit in Europe, so that's normal that I'm saying this. But if I do this, it's also because it's the style of rums I prefer. If you look at the Scotch whiskies, those whiskeys, they're always so refined and elegant, and it takes time. Well, for the rums, I like them to be aged in Europe because they take more time. It takes more time to extract flavors, but at the same time, it makes them much more elegant. So tropical vs continental, the two of them, they can be amazing. It's only about selecting the right barrels, which have to be bottled at the right time.
Okay. Thank you very much. No more questions about this one.
No more question. Okay. So you will see, I usually don't give very detailed tasting notes. I feel, and this is known, tasting is very intimate. Everybody has its own referral. You know, if I had apples and bananas yesterday, I might feel more of the apple and the banana in the rum today. But if you had pineapple and I don't know, cinnamon, you might find more cinnamon and pineapple in your rum. So that's why I'd rather leave people make their own tasting. I would give you some families of flavors that you are more likely to find in the specific rums we're talking about, but this is your job to make your own tasting note. So next one, we'll come back to the Jamaica 5-year-old, I guess. Oops. Right?
Number 4, yes.
Number 4, okay. Sorry, I'm having trouble with the presentation. Okay, number 4, Jamaica 5-year-old, 43% ABV, right? Okay, perfect. So this one, a blend again, a blend from only one distillery, from only one origin, from 2 distilleries. So 100% rum from Jamaica, rums from the distillery called Clarendon and a distillery called Worthy Park. It's a real 5-year-old rum. Previously, we had an 8-year-old rum, same thing. It's a real 8-year-old rum, no mix, no blends of aging. If there is an age on my label, all the rum in the bottle is of that age, minimum. 43% ABV, 10 grams of sugar per liter. So a bit higher ABV content, 43 instead of 40 compared to the Caraibe. And a touch less of sugar because alcohol, the same way than sugar, is a flavor fixative. So if I raise the alcohol content, I can reduce the sugar content. Jamaican rums, I think for the geeks, for the rum lovers, I think Jamaica is one of the top origin. I would say there is Jamaica, there is the French Caribbean, Guadeloupe and Martinique. And there is Guyana, British Guyana. Those are the kind of geeky rums for the rum lovers. Jamaica, why? Because they have these very powerful flavors. Each distillery from Jamaica produces kind of the same style of rums, funky, powerful, full-bodied rums. And I think this one is a subtle entry level to the world of the crazy Jamaican rums. I think this is a beautiful, well-balanced Jamaican rum blend, which can help you understand better the rums of Jamaica without having to start with something which is too powerful. So usually I call Jamaican rums, I call them the rum of breakfast, not because you have them at breakfast, but because they get all the flavors of breakfast. It starts with something a bit malty, like the muesli or the granola you're having in the morning. You get something creamy, like the yogurt. Then it moves to something very fruity, crushed bananas, tropical fruits. And finally, the finish, especially with this one, you take a little sip, you mix it with your saliva, and then the finish is about like chewing in a toast with melted butter on it. You put the toast in the toaster in the morning, you put butter, you chew on it, and it makes you salivate. It makes you want to have another sip of it. And that's exactly the way I feel when I drink those rums from Jamaica. Of course, Jamaican rums to be mixed in cocktails are pretty cool because they have this, this character. Once you mix it in a cocktail, it gives another dimension of the cocktail. And a cocktail which is nice to try with this one is a cocktail called the Julep. Normally it is made with bourbon, the mint julep. It's the most famous cocktail for the Kentucky Derby. That's why it's made with bourbon normally. But if you mix it with Jamaican rums, it becomes a Jamaican julep, and that's pretty amazing. Basically, a julep is about rum, brown sugar, and bitter with crushed ice. You pour everything over crushed ice, and you put some mint that you muddle. So it's a kind of variation of the mojito with no citrus, but it is very refreshing and it is delicious. Any questions? Not so much. In Jamaica, there are 5 distilleries that will help us to make the transition for the next one. In Jamaica, there are 5 distilleries which are still producing rum nowadays. There is a distillery called Clarendon, which is also sometimes known under the name Monymusk. There is a distillery called Worthy Park. There is a distillery called Hamden. There is a distillery called Appleton. Also, they have a plant called New Yarmouth. And finally, the last one is called Long Pond. Long Pond, unfortunately, burnt 2 years ago, but they're rebuilding it right now. Okay, let's move on to the next one, if there are no questions. So remember, this one had a touch of sugar, 15 grams of sugar per liter. And the 2 last ones, no sugar. The previous one, no sugar either. Next one is another Jamaican rum, right? If I'm not mistaken, but the 10-year-old one.
Yes, next one is the Jamaican 10-year-old single cask is 44.
Yeah, the multi-distillery, right? The blend.
I don't know, but probably.
It's a small batch. Basically, the idea is I can do a single cask, which is only the liquid from one distillery in one barrel, or I can do a single cask, which is the liquid of several distilleries in only one barrel. And sometimes I can do a small batch, which is the liquid of one distillery in one barrel, but 2 or 3 barrels blended together. So one distillery, one barrel, one distillery, one barrel, one distillery, one barrel. Blended together, 3 up to 10 barrels blended together, it could be accounted as a small batch. The one we're having is a blend aged in one barrel of 2 distilleries. So one origin, 1 barrel, 2 distilleries. Basically, it is a 10-year-old rum, the 10-year-old version of the one we just had with no sugar. So 44% ABV, no sugar, straight 10-year-old rum. Once again, you will see the color is not that powerful, but that's what I like. It's about education towards my consumer, is that, remember, color has nothing to do with flavor, especially in the spirit business. This rum that you're having right now is pretty light in color, but still you will see in flavor, it is very powerful. Most of the time, the big multinational, they put a lot of coloring in the rum, making people think that the darker it is, the older it is, so the more expensive they have to pay for. But you can have very dark rums or very dark spirits, which have no flavor at all. So remember, color has nothing to do with flavor in the spirit business, especially that 95% of spirits contain coloring. So this one, 10-year-old single cask, once again, no coloring. I cannot reproduce this one. And it's a blend, again, from 2 distilleries, Worthy Park and Monymusk. And that's why on the label, it should say multi-distillery. It is the kind of the same style of flavors than the previous one, but even more powerful. And you can really, so what makes Jamaican rum so powerful and so specific is the idea of their fermentation. Something you have to keep in mind as a spirit producer. You can be the best distiller in the world with the best still in the world, the most expensive still in the world. If we give you a product which has been badly fermented to distill, well, you can never make a good spirit. So the key point, the key, how do you put this? The key moment for a spirit producer, for a distiller, it's not distilling, it's about fermenting. Fermentation is when you create the flavors of a spirit, even though the flavors that you will find 10, 20, 30 years later on in the cask. Most of those flavors, they are created only during a period of 24 hours, 72 hours, 1 week, 2 weeks during the fermentation time. It's when the yeast, they eat the sugar and they transform it into alcohol. And when doing this, if you, depending on the yeast you select, depending on the time you leave it, you are more likely to create more or less flavor. So Jamaican rums, they are the result of long fermentations and most of the time open air fermentations, which means by fermenting longer, you don't force the yeast to go too quickly and create alcohol more than flavors. When you let the yeast take their time, eat the sugar slowly, you help them to create more flavors, and especially in Jamaica, where they also had some stuff in the pot still, which is what we call the dunder. The dunder is the idea that from 1 year to another, they take the remainings of the distillation, they put it in the ground, and 5 years later, they dig the ground out. They put this in a tank, they put molasses and water, and they let everything ferment, and they take every time a little touch that they put in the still. And the more touch they take from this dunder pit to put in the still, the more flavorful the rums will be. And there, only in Jamaica, you find this style of rums. And Jamaican rums, they are only pot still rums. Well, no, sorry, not all of them, but most of the distilleries, they are pot still. Clarendon, they have the two different style of distillation. They have pot still and they have column still. And they produce a lot of different style of rums, from the lighter style of rums to go in the Malibu or the Captain Morgan rum, up to the more heaviest and the more flavorful side of rums, which they distill in the copper pot still. So that's why Jamaican rums are very well regarded by rum aficionados, because it can make some very powerful rums.
Okay, I'm getting some question regarding which, in your opinion, is currently distilling the best rum
in Jamaica.
In every region, you know, not just Jamaica. Which is currently the best distillery that you like currently?
So I love some Jamaican rums for sure. I like some specific rums from Guyana, from the Diamond Distillery. They have very old stills. They have some stills which are which date back to the 19th century up to 1890. They are made out of wood and copper. And there's a distillery I love, but which you can only find their rums in the island. It is a distillery called Rivers Rum in Grenada. It's amazing. They produce very small quantity, but everything is sold on the island. And finally, I'd say some cool, very good French distilleries like Remonac in Guadeloupe, Longto, GM in Martinique. They are pretty good distilleries.
One question of mine is, how do you explain the improvement and also the popularity that rum is gaining in recent years? Like maybe 5 years ago, most people I know would not even consider buying a rum at whiskey prices. And now, you know, people that are drinking whiskey and other distillates, they will sometimes even prefer buying a good rum over some mediocre whiskeys. So why has rum really emerged in recent years?
I think this is part of the revival of rum. This is the fact that most of whiskey drinkers used to think, and I started with whiskeys too, so I used to think the same, that rum was too sugary, then rum was not powerful enough, was not elegant enough, or interesting enough. And I think with more bottlers like me, with more brands trying to be more honest and bottling more honest rums, we kind of show the spirits lovers, not only the whiskey drinkers, but the spirits lovers in general, that the rum category can be actually a very interesting category. I feel that the spectrum of flavors in the whiskey world is sometimes a bit smaller than the spectrum of flavors in the rum world. The rum world, they can go in so many directions in terms of flavors. The whiskey world, I feel the flavor profile is a bit more narrow if you don't put the peated whiskeys aside. But so I guess that's what made the rum market more interesting to whiskey aficionados over the past years, and also the prices, because 5 years ago, 3 years ago, for the same age, because people, unfortunately, most of the time they pay attention to age more than flavors, but for the same age, they could buy a rum cheaper than a whiskey. And I think that has also attracted some of the whiskey drinkers toward the world of rum.
Okay, thank you.
Any more questions?
Okay. No, I guess people were asking about your favorite rum currently, but you answered that. So I think we can move on. Yeah.
Cool. Well, be ready, because the next one we're having, I think, is top 3 in my bottlings out of all the the single cask I've done. Just as a quick story. So since I started 6 years ago, I think I've bottled more than 150 different casks. And there's a gentleman in France, he basically collects every bottle. So he has one bottle of each of those. His collection is much bigger than mine, because I cannot keep one bottle of each of the rums. But yeah, that's also good to keep track. And the next one we're having, which is the Trinidad 16-year-old bottled cask strength, I think is a nice one, Django. I think this is one of my favorite bottling since I started. It is an amazing rum. It is, as I described it, velvet in your mouth. It is so smooth for the ABV. It is so powerful and elegant at the same time. It feels like it is, if it is sweet, but there is no sugar added. This is really a meditation rum, as I call it. You take a sip, you close your eyes, you enjoy, you travel, and that's the very amazing rums that we can find. And I think sometimes for this price, if you were to find the same flavors in the whiskey world, it would cost you much more than what this rum actually cost. But so to give you a bit of background about this rum and why it is so actually specific, even though it doesn't look like it. So in Trinidad and Tobago, there's only one distillery remaining nowadays, which is called the TDL Distillery, Trinidad Distillers Limited. And this distillery is the producer of Angostura. So you might have heard about this rum brand called Angostura. And they also make a bitter, which we use in cocktails. So TDL, they are owned by the Trinidadian government. And over the past years, there were some other distilleries in Trinidad and Tobago. One of them, which is kind of a collectible item nowadays, is called Caroni. So Caroni was a distillery which closed in 2002. And all of the remaining products from Caroni, all of the remaining rums from Caroni, they were sold on auctions to spirit producers in the world. And the ones which were not sold went to Trinidad Distillers Limited. And I feel, because the distillery closed in 2002, I feel that some of the rum in this bottle you have is of Caroni, was distilled at Caroni, because the two distilleries were owned by the government, and sometimes they were mixing the products. So this is actually, I think, a cheap Caroni. And it is aged for 16 years. It is bottled 63.5% ABV, but even though it is very smooth. So this is, I don't do all the time cask strength rum. Most of the time I dilute them, but sometimes there is, when I taste a cask and I feel the rum is just beautiful the way it is in the cask, we just decide to bottle, to filter, to pump the rum out of the barrel and put it in the bottle straight away. No other things, just rum from the barrel to the bottle. This is the most honest way you can have your spirit, and this is what you are tasting right now. So a 16-year-old amazing Trinidad rum. It has these flavors of green tobacco, it is licorice, it is maracuja fruit, it is roasted pineapple. It is so smooth, so sweet. You even have this idea of a vinegar, balsamic vinegar, some smokiness. It is quite a beauty, and this one flew out of the shelves in Europe. Actually, there around Europe there are no more, but Igal, because he had secured some, he only received them, so he's lucky enough to have some. But you cannot find it anymore, and to me, it's one of my top 5 of my bottlings. I had a Trinidad Caroni 21-year-old, which I did for Denmark, cask strength, which was amazing. I had a Jamaica Hamden aged in French cask, which I feel was amazing. I had an Indonesia 10-year-old, which was one of my first bottling, which was amazing. And I feel this one is one of the top one also. And of course, if you like cigars, that marries very well. I'm not a big cigar smoker. I'm trying to be better. I'm trying to start. Some people try to stop, but I'm trying to start. But yeah, a good cigar with a beautiful rum like this is definitely amazing. And what's surprising is that shows you that you cannot lie within the spirit world. If you want to make a good spirit, age has some influence on how the spirit tastes. Why? Especially if the spirit is aged in a barrel, because the lighter the alcohol, which are the harshest, the less pleasant, those alcohols are the first one to get to leave the barrel, because they are the lightest. So when the barrel breathes, because the barrel breathes, well, those alcohol will be pushed away. And 16 years later, all remaining in the liquid are the heavy alcohols, the heavy molecules, which usually are the most flavorful ones.
Okay, we have some questions from people. So first one is, how do you decide when to bottle the rum? What's your trigger to know that this is the right time for bottling? And the second one is, how many casks have you got in your aging warehouse currently?
Okay, so it is very subjective when a barrel is ready. I guess it's ready when I feel I like it, when I feel it's ready. If I were to go further in this question, it's I could say that I don't only barrels cask which I love, but I barrel cask which I know are of good quality and which could fit to a certain type of consumers. So not always I'm bottling cask which I feel are the most amazing, like this one, but I like also to select barrels which when I taste them have just reached their peak, which means elegance, which means a balance, because that's kind of, I'd say that's the mojo of Compagnie des Indes, elegance and balance, something I learned from the wine world, where we tell ourselves a wine has to be well balanced between the flavors of the terroir, the barrel, and the know-how of the winemaker. It's the same with the barrel. When I taste it, I feel it reached its peak because it's balanced, it's elegant, and it's ready to be bottled like this. Next question was about, what was it about again? Next question, can't remember.
Cask, how many casks do you have in stock?
Well, yeah, thank you again. So for the cask number, I have something like, right now, if you were to take into account 250 casks in stock. It doesn't feel like a lot, but in terms of money, this is a lot of money. I only started 6 years ago. So yeah, it is not a big amount, but that's already quite enough to have some funky things. And also sometimes I do what's the name? I do secure. I do buy cask which I leave within my distillers, but that we can bring in later on.
Okay, one more question is, what's the most bizarre room that you ever bottled? People are asking something to do with some lard or something.
Oh yeah. Well, next slide. Good thing you talk about it. Here you can see it's true that I have some bottlings which are pretty crazy, but I like to experiment, and I think that's some of the cool part of my job, to experiment and to try new things. And I like pitted whiskey. I like everything smoky. I like smoked mozzarella. I like smoked salmon, smoked tea. And I wanted to bring these smoky flavors into the rum world by different processes. So the idea of creating a range called Boulet de Canon, which translates into English as cannonball, was the idea of bringing smoky flavors in the rum world. So every even number, so Boulet Canon number 2, number 4, number 6, there are rum finished or aged in pitted whiskey barrel, pitted Scotch whiskey barrel. Every time I change, there were Bunnahabhain, Laphroaig, Caoilila, Talisker, and every odd number is something weird. So for example, number 3, I took the 2 smokiest teas of the world. I mixed the rum with I made 150 liters of tea. I let it get colder, and I mixed the tea with the rum. So that brought the bitterness and the smokiness of the tea in the rum. That was funky. Number 5, which you can see on the picture here, I took 2 barrels in a smoke house of a gentleman making of the butcher of my village, and we smoked the barrels among the sausages and the meat. So that was pretty interesting. Number 7, I used some spices to bring the flavors of gunpowder in the rum. And number 9, the one which I just released, is what's the name? It's a partnership with a chain of restaurants in Paris. They do Texan barbecue, which means they have big barbecues and they smoke meat for 17 hours in a special oven. And during those 17 hours, the meat get rid of its fat. I take the fat, I mix it with the rum. It's a technique called a fat wash, which we use in producing fragrances, or also in the mixology world. And then I filter this fat away, but it left the flavor of the fat in the rum. So pretty funky, pretty specific. But yeah, so that's the crazy flavors around the Boulet de Canon, which is bringing the smoky flavors in the rum world. And there is one called October Rum that you can see here. I release this one every 2 years, and it's a rum aged in a beer cask. So I put the rum in the beer barrel for around 6 months, and it extracts the flavor of the beer, and it is pretty funky. And what I do, I don't filter this rum. So like a beer re-fermented in a barrel, you do have it's cloudy. Other questions?
Let me have a look if we have any more on the chat.
Just gonna say one thing. As soon as we can get an airplane from France to Israel, you're on the first plane.
Yeah, well, I've never been to Israel, and I've heard so much about it, so I'd love to come for sure.
I get you to Israel as soon as I get a commercial flight from France.
What else can I say? No, I think we've touched most of the things. Let me see if I can see the question. I think now.
People are asking about if you can recommend any cigars that go well with your rum.
Ooh, that's a tricky question. I'm not a, yeah.
And
I'd say something funky would be matching the origins. There is Guatemala, there is Trinidad, there is Salvador. Well, try to match the origins because that's kind of bringing two terroirs of the same origins together. Of course, Cuban rums with Cuban cigars, why not? Even though it is tricky to find some flavorful, powerful Cuban rums. But yeah, try matching the origins.
Okay, one more question is regarding the labels. Who designs the labels for your rum?
It's a gentleman which used to work for a big agency in Paris. Now he retired and he does this for the fun, and he's a collector. He collects very old labels of cognacs, of liqueurs from the 1900s from France. And he takes some of those little pieces of old labels that he brings together to make my labels.
Okay, thank you. So I don't see, one more question is, do you accept visitors in your warehouse?
In the warehouse? Well, yeah, it's a long way from Israel, but if you make it all the way down, I'm happy to.
In Dijon, the warehouse, or
it's 1 hour away from Dijon, so it's a place where it's a friend of mine. He makes beer and he also makes French whiskeys, and we share the warehouse. So he has some of his French whiskeys. I have some of my rums, and we share all the materials like the forklift. We share the pump. We share the bottling line. Everything together. So it's a good deal for both of us. But yeah, if you let me know early enough, I'm happy to open the doors and we can test directly from the barrels.
I'm coming to French.
Yeah, so let me know if you come to the Mustard City, and then I can drive you to the warehouse.
We come see you soon.
Yeah, but if you come, you have to buy a barrel. So that's.
Just a little question. Sorry, I'm driving, so
no worries.
Not write it down to Gal. In this market, in this growing rum market, how hard for you to keep the quality of your blend? Are you mostly taking from your own stock, or you are forced to buy some barrels just to maintain the quality of the blend?
So good question. Well, most of people think I'm a big company, but to be honest, when I do a blend, for example, Caraïbe, it is something like 5,000 bottles a year, which accounts for 10 barrels, 12 barrels. So it is not that much every year, you know, but distilleries, they produce so much rum. So I take from my own barrels. Sometimes I source from other barrel suppliers, but I could do double or 3 times more volumes. I would have no problem to keep quality the same. The most important is to get supply from good distilleries, from people which distill well and know what they do, and those guys, they can supply much more rum than I will ever buy from them. So that's pretty easy going. No problem for supply for the blends. For the single cask, though, it's getting more and more tricky to get good prices for good rums. And actually, that's a tip I can give everybody here. It's that right now is the good time to buy rums, because since I started this brand, for example, 5 years ago, I was buying a 10-year-old Barbados rum barrel for 50% cheaper than when I'm buying it today. Why? Because in fact, if you compare rum to whiskey, there are so much less rum distilleries in the world than there are whiskey distilleries. The stock of rum is so smaller in the rum world than in the whiskey world that actually rum should cost more money than aged whiskeys, because people sell rum as a white rum, but they don't have to put it in a barrel. So distilleries, it was not, how to put it like this, it was not a tradition for distilleries to put the rum in a barrel. Whereas if you do it for whiskeys, if you don't do this, you cannot call the whiskey whiskey. So that's why whiskey stock are always much bigger than rum stocks. But sorry, I talk a lot. I go in a lot of different directions, but I guess I give some information.
Thank you for the answer.
You're very welcome.
Okay, any more questions to Florent before we conclude the tasting? Anyone?
Don't be shy.
Okay.
I wrap up the tasting then.
Yeah.
I always finish this way. Well, first of all, I'm very impressed and very excited to see that all the way up to Israel, people are interested in my rums. I feel honored. So thank you so much for giving me some of your time, an hour and a half listening to me. I hope I was not too boring. I hope I made you travel through the the world of rum today. I hope you learned a bit more about rums. The idea is to educate people. Once again, as I say, I don't have a big marketing budget, so that's why normally I take my car or I take planes and I visit and I meet people face to face and I tell them what I've been doing tonight to educate them, to make them understand that rum doesn't have to be so sugary, so vanilla, so colory. It can be very elegant in a lot of different ways, but it doesn't have to be tricked, or it doesn't have to be created from only flavoring. So all together, nowadays, everybody, all of you guys, you become ambassadors. You become ambassadors of good rums. And it's your job nowadays when you have a bottle of an honest rum. It doesn't have to be Compagnie des Indes only. There are other honest products, honest rums on the market. But once you have a bottle of honest rum at home, you introduce your friends to rum and you explain them that rum doesn't have to be always sugary, vanilla, and caramelly. And all together, we fight against the pirates and we make a better rum world. So that's a bit the way I wrap up my tasting most of the time. Thank you so much for your time. Let's all fight against the pirates, and I hope to meet you all in person very soon in Israel.
Thank you very much, Florent, for your time. Thank you very much.
תודה רבה.
תודה רבה.
How do we say?
תשארו אחרי שאנחנו מסיימים.
תודה רבה. Thank you.
תודה רבה. Thank you so much. Merci beaucoup. Thank you, everybody. Have a good night, and I wish to meet you all very soon in person. Bye-bye to everybody. I can see
Laurent, I will call you in a few minutes.
Okay. Bye-bye, guys. Thank you so much.
Bye, good night.
ביי, תודה רבה.
תודה רבה. תודה רבה, אנה.
Thank you very much. אנחנו אומרים שלום לכולם, אז רק כמה הודעות קטנות. אז דבר ראשון, כמו שהבטחנו, אמרנו שאנחנו נעשה הגרלה בקרב כל האנשים שמשתתפים בטעימה, שיקבלו בקבוק מתנה של קומפני דה אינדס. אז לא עשינו את זה במעטפות, כמו שבהתחלה אמרנו, בגלל הקורונה וכל מיני מגבלות, אבל הגרלנו את זה מכל האנשים שהשתתפו בטעימה, והזוכה מאושרת היא חנה, אז מזל טוב חנה, זכית בבקבוק. אנחנו ניצור איתך קשר מחר, ואנחנו נתאם בדיוק איך אנחנו מעבירים לך אותו.
תודה רבה, תודה רבה.
תהני. כן?
זו הפתעה.
גם לנו. אז תהני. דבר לגבי, הרבה אנשים שאלו פה לגבי מחיר של המוצרים באתר של סיפיר, אז אנחנו נעדכן מחר באימייל את כולם באיזשהו קוד הטבה שאנחנו נקבל מיגאל, אז ברגע שיהיה לנו את הפרטים ואת הקוד, אנחנו נשלח אימייל לכל אחד שישתתף בטעימה ותוכלו להשתמש בו בכדי לקנות את המוצרים הנחמדים שטעמנו היום, ועוד כאלו שגם לא טעמנו.
יש שם 14 ביטויים, יש 13 ביטויים שם.
יש דברים מעניינים, אז יגאל יעדכן אותנו ואנחנו נעביר לכם בדיוק את המידע. זה לגבי ההודעות מנהלתיות, אני מקווה שבאמת נהניתם. אני מאוד נהניתי מהערב, באמת יש פה דברים שהפתיעו מאוד לטובה. לא טעמתי את חלקם הגדול של הביטויים פה, ואני באמת אהבתי מאוד. אז קודם כל תודה לך יגאל, שבאמת הבאת לנו אחלה של מותג. כל מותג של בקבוק עצמאי שמגיע לארץ זה ברכה, וכן ירבו. באמת תענוג, גם ברום, גם בוויסקי, באמת דברים מעניינים.
יש עוד משהו שאני עובד עליו עכשיו, שהוא ברמה של... בטופ, אם אני מצליח, אז זה באמת, באמת, באמת.
אנחנו מחכים, ברגע שיהיה רשמי, אנחנו נעשה טעימה.
זה פשוט משא ומתן שאני זוכר אחריו.
מקווה שיהיה בהצלחה. לכל מי שמשתתף בטעימה הבאה שלנו, הטעימה הבאה שלנו היא טעימה של פורסקוור, עוד שבוע, ויש לנו עוד כמה דברים מאוד מעניינים, גם מבחינת רום, גם מבחינת וויסקי שאנחנו עובדים עליהם. כמובן, תתעדכנו בטלגרם, בוואטסאפ, בקבוצה, כדאי לעקוב, כי באמת האירועים די מצומצמים ונמכרים מאוד מהר, אז באמת תהיו מהירים ותעקבו. תודה לכם שוב פעם, באמת תודה לכל מי שעשה את הטעימה הזאת ואפשר אותה, גם האדמינים האחרים וגם יגאל וגם כולם, ושיהיה לנו לילה טוב.
תודה, לילה טוב.
תודה רבה.
תודה.
תודה רבה, ערב טוב.
תודה רבה, לילה טוב.
לילה טוב.
יאללה, תודה רבה, היה אחלה.
הייתה טעימה נהדרת.
בכיף.
ביי גליטו.
טוב, פעם הבאה תשב איתנו, אחי. תשב איתנו, אנחנו מתגעגעים אליך, יש לנו טעימת גרפות ביחד.
בקרוב, בקרוב, תן לנו לסיים.
איזה טעימת גרפות? רגע, איזה טעימת גרפה?
אתה רוצה בפנים? אז אין בעיה. העניין זה, תביא 2 בקבוקי גרפה טובים, תצטרף. הדיבור זה אני, אבא, אסף וכל מי שרוצה להיות איתנו.
גל, אנחנו נדבר, יעל תטפל בעניין הזה. אין בעיה. יש לי 2 בקבוקי גרפה לא טובים, אני יכול לתת אותם.
לא, רק טובים. אתה לא טובים, תביא את עצמך, תשאיר אותם בבית.
רן, מביא גם בשבילך, יאללה, בכיף.
בוא, באמת, צריך לדבר על זה.
יאללה, בקרוב. יהודה, אתה שקט היום, מה זה?
אני עבדתי היום, לא כמוכם.
אני עבדתי גם.
אני עבדתי היום.
אנחנו עבדנו מאוד קשה. עבדנו מאוד מאוד קשה. הם עבדו מאוד מאוד. התחלנו במפשלה, המשכנו במזקקה, משם ליקב, ואז הגענו לטעימת רום. זאת אומרת, היום, חגיגות היום הולדת שלי, שהוא אתמול, אז הייתי ב4 דברים שונים בישראל. גרנצלה. חסר רק ג'ינס, את החמישייה הקדושה, וזהו.
יאללה, לך על זה עכשיו, אני אומר טעימה.
מצאתי חור הבטחה בצה"ל, ואז אני התחשק לי לשתות פשוט אלכוהול כדי לנסות להעלים את זה.
עזוב בצה"ל, מה זה צה"ל? צה"ל זה ארגון...
קטן. קיקיוני, קיקיוני.
לא קיקיוני, אבל אתה יודע, כבר די, יש שלום עכשיו, עזוב.
עדיף שיש שלום, יו, הזוועות שאותם ראיתי. אבל אני לא אדבר.
אמרתי שהוא מחפש עבודה.
גל, אנחנו ממשיכים בדייט השבועי שלנו, שבוע הבא נתראה עוד פעם מחדש.
כן, יאללה, בכיף. פעם הבאה אני רוצה את יהודה ערני, שלא יעבוד קשה מזה.
אני רק רוצה להגיד משהו אחד, חנה, מגיע לך בקבוק הזה, את מנטורית. זה כיף לראות אותך בכל טעימה שתדעי לך.
תודה רבה.
פני, רוצים רישומים.
שומעים, גלי.
תודה רבה לכם.
יאללה, לילה טוב, חברים.
לילה טוב. תודה. ביי.